All right, welcome to the Church and Context podcast. If you joined us here on the YouTube channel before, we're kind of in a waiting period where we're going to hang on, see if we get any live viewers who want to interact with us and our guests. But before that, we're just here to hang out. So if you're tuning in right now, you can skip ahead about 8 or 9 minutes. You'll see a countdown video, and at that point, then we'll be officially recording. But sometimes this is the best content, right, Jonah?
Oh yeah.
I think this is pretty solid.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like a lot of this ends up just being random like NFL talk for some reason. Yeah.
Apparently it's NBA talk right now because we got a Blazers game to be done in time for.
When Dame is dropping 55 points, 10 plus assists, 10 threes in a game for the first time in NBA history and still losing. There's a lot to talk about. I know I'm bummed too, man. I'm a Blazer fan, die hard.
Oh, that's bad. Like, how does that happen?
I don't know, man. The one thing I will say is I think if it were Kevin Durant or James Harden or like most NBA superstars, I'd be convinced that they were going to leave. Whereas Dame, there's still a chance because he's Dame. Like,
he's loyal.
Human being. Yeah. Which I love, man. Yeah, I feel like he's easier to cheer for that way. Like, it's not just him being good on the court. Like, off the court, he seems like the kind of guy I want to like support. So hopefully he stays, man.
I hope so.
Yeah.
There was a statistic I was trying to find and I couldn't find it, but it was basically like this. And I'll sum it up, and it's probably wrong. But in the last playoff game, there was like in 13 attempts, Dame made 28 points in the fourth quarter and in the overtime. And the rest of his team combined, it was like they had 28 attempts, something like that, and they made like 12 points. So it's like Dame versus his own team. You know, it's just, oh man, it's bad.
That's insane. 28 points off 13 attempts is like absurdly efficient.
It's all threes. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Oh my goodness.
He's a beast.
Yeah. Yeah. He's still like, I don't know. I don't think we're a bad team outside of Dame. No. We're just having a bad playoffs. Like CJ and Nurk are like solid players. Anyways, man. But I like growing up, I've always been an OSU fan, so I'm kind of used to this. You know, I'm pretty resilient for all the things. Yeah. At least we're in the playoffs. Yeah.
It's true. At least we're in the playoffs.
Mm.
Speaking of that, Jonah, speaking of OSU, is your brother home from OSU?
He came home for Labor Day, and I'm actually going to go see him tomorrow because it's his birthday. So I've got a brother that's going to OSU. My dad's an alumni. We're like, somehow he only got one of the four of us to go to OSU. We were all raised on like heavy OSU propaganda. Like, I mean, wearing the shirts everywhere, subliminal beavers all around my house. Yeah. Like, he tried, but only one of us actually went to OSU. So, yeah, no, he's doing good though. Yeah, but Drew, are you into any other sports?
Well, I'm a big NBA guy.
Sweet.
I like baseball, and in baseball, my favorite team is the Oakland Athletics. So
that's right. We've had
they got a lot of drama going on right now. Unfortunately, they're looking. The city's not being as supportive as the MLB wishes they would be. So they're looking to pull them away. And everybody in Oakland is obviously a lot of people in Oakland are really hurt by that. And I'm disappointed too. However, there is talk about Portland getting its team.
That's right.
I've heard about the possibility that my favorite MLB team is looking for a place to land, and it just might end up here. And if that happens, there will be endless rejoicing.
I believe it. I might consider making the A's like
team number one. Yeah, that's a good pick.
I'm not sure about number one. As an Angels fan, I don't know if I could do that. But maybe I won't root for the A's to always lose. You know what I mean? Like,
there we go. Now is a good time to be an Angels fan. I mean, Mike Trout is just a beast. So, I mean,
yeah. Except he's injured until mid-July, but I know. I was really happy they split the series with the A's the other week. I thought they were going to get creamed because they didn't have Trout. But
let's just kind of keep going.
I love how Drew's like disappointed that they went 2-2 against the Angels, and I'm like, yeah, we went 2-2 against the A's. All right.
Well, it's the Angels without Mike Trout. I mean, I think we should have done a little better, but that's okay.
Yep.
It's all good.
It's all good. That's right. I love how your brother commented in the.
Oh, did he?
I should keep that anonymous, right? Someone who also watches the show heard a comment that related to him.
That's awesome. Must be a great guy.
He's okay.
Also, he's okay. That's right.
There we go.
He's like my third favorite brother. So.
Oh, that's brutal.
I'm just kidding.
Love it.
Yeah, to be fair, if you know my brother Gabe, he's like clearly a lock for number one. I don't think anyone. Yeah, Gabe is my favorite brother over me. Like he's just the best. Yeah,
Yep.
Gabe's the goat. I think John. Yeah, that's like known. But my OSU brother, he competes for second. He's up there.
Do you have any siblings, Drew?
I do. I have 2 little sisters.
Two little sisters. Are they also in the area, like the Portland area?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, Hannah's out in Beaverton, and Elise lives downtown. So it's awesome. We all get to hang out. Yeah, it's really cool.
That's
it's good to
great.
be close.
You're kind of closer to them now.
I am closer to them now. Yeah, I mean, we still live in Clackamas, but we're working our way out this way. So
Very nice.
it's a nice long commute. Good podcast time. So.
Perfect.
There you go. That's right. For those of you commuting, Church in Context podcast, we're on episode, what is this, 23, I think?
I think I saw 23.
20? Yeah, we're on 23.
Michael Jordan podcast, everybody.
Hey,
Right.
there we go.
That's right, exactly.
Michael Jordan to the Kobe podcast next.
Oh, yeah.
Got
there
both
we go.
back to back. 2 good numbers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very nice. All right. I think let's get going with our podcast.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's do the countdown and let's get officially started. Hi, and welcome to the Church in Context podcast. I'm John, and I'm here with the host of the show, Jonah. Jonah, how's it going today?
Today is a fantastic day, John. I got the check-in item off my bucket list that I just put on there yesterday. But the school connected to my church had a dunk tank today. And so I got the chance to just get dunked like 17 times. It was insane. Fantastic. I still can't get out of this year. So it was great, though. Everything I hoped would be and more. Would recommend it.
That is fantastic. And we are here today with the acclaimed Portland area youth pastor, Drew. And Drew, how's it going, man?
Going good. I wish I was in a dunk tank today. Jonah, that sounds amazing. You know, I've never been in a dunk tank, but I've been pied a lot of times.
Oh yeah.
I think a dunk tank is a much better experience. Like sometimes when you get pied, like people like put force into it, man. I might have like broken my nose with some of those, you know. It was bad. Dunk tank is great.
Up your nose too? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was bleeding actually afterward. It was really not great. So dunk tank all the way. Yeah.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 would recommend, especially when it's like in the 90s in Portland. Why? Why is it so hot right now, guys? Here in the Portland area, it's insanely hot. So it's a perfect day to get dunked. It was like the perfect way to fill out that bucket list check mark.
I love that.
I love it too. I love that it's like a nice and healthy way for like your students to get out their pent up aggression out against you, you know?
Well, there was some 6th graders that dunked me, and I was like their outdoor school counselor, and I was like kind of a stricter counselor. So I think that there was a little bit more behind those like tennis ball throws than just wanting to see some random guy get splashed. I think there was some vengeance in it.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Well, we are here today, like I mentioned, with Drew, who is a Portland area youth pastor. We're going to talk about the topic of mental health in a few minutes. Drew, can you quickly introduce yourself before we kind of get into our fun roundtable discussion today?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Drew Fajen. I am from Portland. Always lived in this area. I love it here. My family is here. I was raised by two amazing parents, both serving in pastoral functions. My sisters and I all grew up going to church together. And then as I was in my teenage years, I really felt like the Lord was putting it on my heart. And I'll tell you more about that because it did come from conversations and my experience with mental health. And so that's how I wound up in ministry. I went to Multnomah University, and then I served in church in East Portland for a year as an intern, and then 9 years at a church out in Clackamas called Spring Mountain. Love it there. And then I have been here at Village Church for 2 months in a new role here, director of youth and their families here. And I'm loving it. I'm loving it. This is a multicultural and missional church, and I'm just excited to be here. So yeah, I'm really pumped to be on this podcast. I've been kind of following along a little bit. You had Greg Birch on your podcast.
We did.
Legendary. So good.
Super legendary. Yeah, we've had some pretty fantastic guests.
Great to be here. So yeah, stoked to be here with you guys.
And we just keep moving up in the ranks too. So we had Dr. Birch a couple weeks ago, and now we're at Drew. I mean, who's
have we hit the ceiling? Is that
no.
is Drew the ceiling? I'm not sure yet. We could
shrink back in my seat here.
Next week we'll have the Pope or something like that.
Okay.
Well, since you grew up in Portland, and I actually live in the actual city limits of Portland, and Jonah's in the area, we want to start off kind of with a roundtable discussion, just a fun one about some Portland area stereotypes. That's kind of a running theme for us on this podcast, is do some different stereotypes, and thought this would be a good one. I'll open it up with Jonah. What comes to mind for you?
So when I think of Portland, the first thing I think of is flannels. And what I love about flannels is that I feel like they're consistent throughout all of Oregon. It's just different types of flannels. So you go to Eastern Oregon, you get very kind of rancher flannels, right? You go up to some of the colder parts of Oregon, you're going to get people in these more thicker winter green kind of flannels. In Portland, it's more of just the aesthetic to have some kind of flannel on all the time. Short sleeves in the summer, long sleeves in the winter, but always a flannel. So when I think of Portland, that's one of the first things I think of is the flannel game is very strong in the city.
Flannel game.
The flannel game. I love it. Oh, Drew, what about you? Anything come to mind?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing, of course, is coffee, right? Portland's a coffee city.
Yep.
We got the most amazing roasters and culture, and it's crazy. It's ever expanding. So I think I'd probably talk about coffee and the coffee connoisseurs and stuff in here. Yeah, a lot of snobs, which is unfortunate,
yes.
But a lot of people who really know what they're talking about. So I would say Portland is a big time coffee scene.
Big time coffee scene, and it's one of those things where you have the snobs. You also have the hipster side of it too. So either Stumptown is the best, or it's definitely not the best, right? You know what I mean?
It's so mainstream, man. It's so mainstream.
Yes, it's too mainstream. That's right. So what's your favorite, Drew? Since you're in the
Stumptown's owned by Pete's now, so I mean it is mainstream, but at the same time.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, but I would say my personal favorite, it's a few different ones, but I really like this one called Courier. The Courier is super good. I really like Nosa Familia is right up there for me. Love
Drew,
those guys.
You took my Nosa Familia. That's my favorite.
I took it. Oh, good.
Yep.
They're great. I love Nosa. Yeah, I think I'll just stop with those two for now, but
okay.
I could go for a while, so I'm gonna stop myself.
Perfect. I'm already laughing. Jonah, what about you? What's your favorite coffee?
I love hot chocolate. I'm not a coffee guy. Yeah, water. Unironically, water is my favorite drink. I don't really drink soda. I don't drink. I don't drink coffee. Good cold glass of water gets me through the day. Starbucks has great water, so
triple filter. Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
Portland has good water, actually. Yeah. Portland's water.
You do have good water. No fluoride in it.
Yeah.
Hey, that's good.
Remember that whole controversy? There's a huge controversy about fluoride in the water. Remember that?
Yeah.
There's billboards everywhere, big, whole buildings are no, don't put fluoride in our water.
No.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
It was. And then you see on the grocery store shelves there for kids, you have fluoridated water. That's actually a thing. Yeah. it kind of in addition to the snobbery, you have people are snobs about their favorite donut or ice cream as well. So there's like this foodie culture. That's kind of my thing. There's a foodie culture as well. And there are just some really, really good, I think food carts are a thing that was kind of new to me moving to the Portland area about 6 years ago. And I know they're a little more popular nationwide now, but food carts are a big thing, and just like this foodie stuff. We have the famous voodoo donuts, but most people in Portland say that's their favorite because one get and look at that. But yeah, that's just the foodie culture. All right, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. We're gonna edit that one out. That's fun. That's
a little bit choppy there.
I know. Sorry.
I think Drew was also on because we were both moving in like real time, and I was like,
I know. Okay,
no worries.
No, you're good, dude. You're
Portland internet, man.
Portland internet. That's the other stereotype. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna repeat mine, and we're gonna edit that out. So mine is kind of what Drew was saying, is that there's a foodie culture as well. So there's like, people have different favorite donuts and different favorite ice cream, and there's just a big food cart culture as well. That's kind of, at least was kind of new to me, living in the Portland area. So a lot of foodie stuff. If you want good food, any type of food allergy too, I mean, this is the place to go. Drew and I have connected online over a place called Tight Tacos. Oh, so good. I want it for dinner. I love it. Jonah, any other stereotypes from you?
One thing, I think we touched on it a bit already, but the general Portland culture that like things that are cool are suddenly not cool. I find that really weird. Like, so, in Portland, one of our big landmarks is Voodoo Donuts, right? And if you ask anyone in Portland what their favorite donut is, they'll go out of the way to explain why it's not Voodoo Donuts, because that's the one that you think it's going to be, because that's the cool and it's what you expect. And they want to be different, right? And I'm that way. I'm not saying that's just other people in Portland. That's me, 100%. If a movie series gets popular, as like a Portland adjacent person, I feel like I can't like a popular movie. It's just how it works. That's just part of the cultures. We have to keep Portland weird, I guess, right? We have to be different. We can't like things that other people like. I don't know why, but it's just part of Portland, I guess.
What about you, Drew? Any other stereotypes come to mind?
Yeah, I think I would go with Jonah again and kind of take it like even to a meta level where it's like everybody in Portland wishes it was old Portland and they hate new Portland. But the thing is, I don't know if anyone even knows what old Portland is.
Sure.
Because like growing up here, a lot of the places that are cool now were like scary when I was a kid. But I would also say there are good things about old Portland, which is that it was far less gentrified than it is now. And so there's a balance, but like Portland always claims itself being this like super progressive city. Portland has like a terribly racist past. And so there's all this stuff where it's like, we're amazing, we're so moving forward, and it's like, I mean, honestly, not really though. And so there's this awkward tension between Portland's past and Portland's future and where we are now. And it's just like, you can't really win. You know what I mean? Like, we want to move forward, but we're not going to do it unless we acknowledge the past. But then people don't like where we're at now. It's just, it's awkward. Yeah. It's an awkward place to live, but it's a good place to live in a lot of other ways. So it's just, a city full of tension.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I was commenting to Jonah before we started recording that I've lived in cities in California and Texas, and Portland is probably the least diverse city or area I've lived in. So, I mean, just to your point, that could be a stereotype. If I can just throw out one more, that's you think of Portland, is that it's always raining, and that also simultaneously getting outside and doing outdoor sports or activities is also extremely important. I mean, we have some of the best natural scenery at least I've ever experienced. So despite the rain, we get outside and we love it. And there's all these awesome companies that have all this outdoor, stuff to buy. And there's just most beautiful hiking trails and waterfalls, and it's legit up here. So come and visit if you don't live in the area.
Yeah, I definitely recommend the Gorge. That's my go-to. Like if I have a good weekend free, then the Gorge is where I go. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Well, Drew, we wanted to talk to you about mental health. Mental health, just as it relates to maybe your experience, especially being in youth ministry and working with students who've dealt with those issues. For us, in the Pacific Northwest, it feels like it can be a little more relevant, maybe because of seasonal affective disorder, speaking of all the rain, right? And just the different things that come with that. But also just, it seems like an issue that is getting worse and not better as well. At least, maybe not in the awareness of it, but at least in the sense that more people experience it. So we wanted to have a healthy discussion. This has actually been one of our earliest episodes of Church in Context. We did talk about this, I believe, just between Jonah and I. But it's so important. We want to bring it up again with a guest. So I have a couple of questions for you, Drew.
Yeah.
And feel free to kind of integrate more of your background too as we talk about this. So we've asked the question, kind of what is your background, but just with that, why is mental health important to you?
Yeah. So I think in a lot of youth ministry settings, you'll find that the teenage years are some of the most tumultuous years in people's lives. And so being a youth worker, youth pastor, I think I find that many of my students are struggling with all kinds of mental health issues, but a lot of the time, either they don't want to acknowledge it, or it is something that they've not been told before. And of course, it's never a youth pastor's job to diagnose someone, but I think it's really important to be aware of the difficulties that happen and the ways our brains work sometimes. And so I think that's one of the main reasons. But the biggest reason, honestly, is because it's really close to home for me. I've wrestled with my own mental health my whole life. As a young kid, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and I've had episodic times here and there through my whole life. Times when it's really hard, and then times when it's not so hard. And it's such a complex experience. And I think that a lot of people get anxious, a lot of people get depressed, but I think there's a difference between getting one way and then having it happen all the time. And I think that's the difference. So mental health is really important to me because it's something that I wrestle with on my own, but it's something that I also want to help coach other people through. So yeah, that's kind of part of why it's important to me. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think if a lot of people were to reflect, I wonder how many of us are dealing with mental health on some kind of spectrum, especially with this past year and how things have gone with the different quarantine aspects, as well as the news and this, what's the word? Just how everything is sensationalized on the news as well. And kind of the fear that is brought up with there, whether it's actually the pandemic or if it's kind of political tensions and those kinds of things as well. There's just a lot of bad news. There's a lot of isolation right now. So I can see things getting worse, and maybe something where you might know someone who's dealing with it too. I feel like it's very hard to be in this country right now and not be untouched by mental health. And so I appreciate you sharing and just being vulnerable and authentic about how it's something you struggled with even as a kid. Yeah. So I also commend whoever, whether it was your parents or some other professional that actually helped you with that at a young age. I feel like
Mm.
a lot of people, at least from my background, maybe this isn't true of everyone, but a lot of kids and students in the church, it feels like they're less likely to be diagnosed or receive help
Oh yeah.
than others. So I just commend whoever it was, whether it was your parents or someone in your church or your school or whatever, that saw that and was able to give you help at an early age, and not just you figuring out when you're an adult.
Right. They say, this is from the National Institute of Mental Health. They say that nearly 1 in every 5 U.S. adults lives with some sort of mental illness.
Oh, wow.
So mental unhealth is the word. Mental illness is, anything that's not health. And then they say that half of all mental health conditions start by the age of 14.
Oh, wow.
And that most of those cases are undetected and untreated until adulthood.
Yeah.
So that's a huge, we're talking about 1/10 of our youth are living with an unknown mental illness. And then the other, 1/5 of those, so half of the 1/10, they have it diagnosed. But still, that's crazy. There's all these people going around who are young people already going through all the hard stuff that happens in your teenage years. You guys remember this. This is hard, right? All of that. On top of it, you're wrestling with your own mental illness, and then some of you don't even know what it is. You can't put words to it. Like, it's a really big problem. Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
It is. And, kind of like I alluded to, I think it's changed, or at least somewhat of the dynamic has shifted too.
Yeah.
So just my follow-up question is, how has mental health changed this past year? And kind of what does it look like now, as a result of kind of on the, what I believe is the back end of the pandemic? And what do you think might be changed? Yeah, right. What do you think might be changed for the future as well? Like as a result of 2020 and the first half of 2021, like how might mental health and how its approach be different? Even if that's positive, like positive changes, more awareness, or maybe it's not positive. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that is really interesting is that a lot of people have become more aware of mental health issues over the last year. One, because they probably, some of them have experienced it for themselves for the first time, whether it's an episode or whether it's staying for a long time. Maybe it's diagnosed for the first time ever or something. So that's great news that people are being aware of it. Awareness is raised this year. I think one thing that's not so great is that people are using that awareness to push all kinds of different agendas and stuff. So people are using mental health as a crowbar to open up these boxes that maybe is not necessarily trying to get into. And I think mental health is its own thing. And so I think if we use mental health to try to push hard on a different, an agenda of some sort, that's not really the goal. The goal is for us to address mental health and mental illness and try to get to a place where people can be healthy. It's its own issue. We don't need to use it to push something else. So that's something I've noticed a lot this year. I think in youth especially, it's been interesting because a lot of people were saying that this year is going to have the biggest, the lockdown is going to have the biggest effect on our youth. And I do believe that in a lot of ways it has. But I also think some of the youth I interact with actually really enjoyed just being by themselves. And so it's interesting because it's kind of a back and forth. To some students, it didn't affect their mental health at all, even though we thought it would. And others, it was a lot harder for them. And that may have to do with other personality traits or family lifestyles, things like that, of course. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed, though, is people try to categorize things and assume things about mental health, but really mental health is much more fluid than we think, and so it's been really interesting as people are coming to a greater awareness and learning more about mental health and mental illness. I think that's probably the biggest thing I take away. People are learning a lot and growing and making space for it, and I'm really grateful that's happening.
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of good points there. I definitely agree that we don't often give mental health its own spotlight. It seems like it's just thrown in with other things that are going on in the world. But it's kind of throw mental health on there as kind of a a side comment, as opposed to giving it its own time in the spotlight, which, it has a lot of it's a conversation worth discussing on its own, full stop. No other uses for that crowbar. The crowbar in itself needs to be talked about.
I think so too.
Yeah. And it's also, I'm in the same boat as you, where it is interesting to see how different kids have been affected very differently by the pandemic. Because like you alluded to earlier, teenage years are probably like the most tumultuous, insane time in like any human being's life. It's just ridiculous. Junior high school ages are really tough to navigate on top of all of this. And I'm really impressed by some kids that have gotten through this really well. Maybe they're just built for it. I agree that a lot of the conversation seems to have changed this year just because of the obvious, just because of the pandemic. And I wonder what like long-term repercussions this will have for bad, of course, but then also for good. I wonder if this raised awareness of mental health will be something that we continue, in the post-COVID world, when it's something less people maybe are going to be experiencing next year. Maybe there's some good that can come out of it.
That's good, Jonah. I think that's a really good point. And I would add that I think even though it's been good for some students, we will see long-term that there are going to be effects that are negative for many, many people. Isolation, we all know, is not a good thing for any human. We're built for community. And so I don't want to like make it seem like the pandemic was great for everybody. Mental health, it's fine. Of course not. I think we'll find soon that, mental health issues will rise up more because of this. Specifically, I think around issues of like phobias of germs and large gatherings of people, things like that. I think those kind of things we'll find just because of the experiences we've all had. Those things will rise for sure. I want to share another interesting like statistic, if that's all right, which is that this is from the World Health Organization, that in the last decade, there's been a 13% increase in mental health disorders and in substance use disorders. So 13% just in the last decade. And it's been slowly rising. So some people might say, well, that's part of a growing awareness. But I don't know if it's just that. I think there's a lot more. There's other causes as well. And interestingly, globally, like government health expenditures, they only give like 2% of that to mental health. And so I think that's another thing that's really tricky, is that the allocation of resources is not level with the growing amount of mental health disorders and substance use disorders we're finding. And those two things do often go hand in hand. So it's interesting, And then, another stat that's just super sad. This is from National Institute of Mental Health, that suicide is the third leading cause of death in 15 to 19-year-olds. Third leading cause of death. That's really significant. And then second leading cause of death in 15 to 29-year-olds. So, I mean, the adolescent years are plagued with mental health issues, and many of these issues are kind of overlapping with substance use and also with suicidal tendencies. So it's really important that we actually, care and we actually do something about mental health. It's not just like a side issue, because it does have effects which can be catastrophic.
Yeah. So, I mean, specifically as somebody in youth ministry right now, as we have these rising numbers of kids going through things, as we live in a world that is really just like a hotbed for mental health issues to come up. You mentioned, the isolation we're going through, the tumultuous, really cultural upheaval too that's going on during people's adolescent years. You're really trying to figure out the world when you're, an adolescent. And right now the world's trying to figure itself out in a lot of ways. A lot of new questions are being asked, and these kids are trying to find something to stand on. So for you, what are your best practices for acknowledging and responding to mental health as a youth worker, as a friend? Because even if not everyone listening right now struggles with mental health themselves, I'm sure that everyone listening knows someone who is. So how can we be a good friend, a good mentor, a good youth leader, a good person in the life of somebody who's struggling?
It's good. Great question. I've got two thoughts. So the first one I would say is to learn how to like sit with God, and whether that's, praying like specific prayers, so praying through the Psalms or that kind of thing, or just being quiet with God, or just like calling out to God and saying like, everything sucks right now, God. Like the Psalms are full of lament, right? There's like, I think it's like a third of the Psalms are lament Psalms. So it's really important that we allow the negative expressions of our spirituality to, you know what I mean? Like our hurt and our sadness and our depression and anxiety and all these things. It's important that we pour those out before God as well. And I think that in the Western church, we don't do a great job of this. In fact, I think we often claim this victorious, like everything's wonderful all the time because Jesus saved us. And it's like, well, yes, absolutely. Jesus saved us and makes our life better. But that doesn't mean life doesn't still suck sometimes. You know, so a resource on this I'd highly recommend is Soong-Chan Ra's book, Prophetic Lament. That's an incredible work on this. Highly recommended if you're looking to get further into studying lament, Psalms of Lament, how to lament from a Christian perspective, and how to do that as a prayer. I highly recommend that. And I think not only on an individual level, though, I think we need to do it together as a church. So that's one thought. The other one is kind of personally, we need to understand that because we have some sort of mental illness or mental health issue or crisis, it's in those moments that we need to understand how close God is to us, almost as if he's even closer in those moments than other times. In Psalm 34, verse 7, it says, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted. In verse 18, it says he saves those who are crushed in spirit. And I think it's really important to notice that the God is specifically near and close to the brokenhearted. Now this is something I studied this, and I was really blown away by this. But maybe John, you probably are into this stuff because you know Hebrew and stuff. But the word for heart in Hebrew is actually a lot more connected to the mind, the way we think about things, the way we work. Yeah. And so the Lord, take it this way: the Lord is near the broken-minded. So the Lord is near the people who have mental health issues. Yeah, I think we can easily make that step, and I think it's really important that we know God is close to us when our mind is not in a state of wholeness. So whatever kind of mental unwholeness we're having, God is near to us and close to us, maybe specifically closer than usual. I can't remember who it was. It was an early church father, but he was talking about the difference between spiritual closeness where you feel near to God and then when you feel far from God. And he says when you feel far from God, God is probably closer to you than when you feel close to God. Interesting thoughts. So I think this is a verse of assurance. Psalm 34, I would say just read the whole thing, but 1-7 is really good. The Lord is near the brokenhearted or the broken-minded. He saves those crushed in spirit. So there's a couple things I would say, ways we can respond and react in a healthy way. Yeah, and then for those of us who work in churches or who have some sort of mentoring role in the life of somebody else, I would say just it's really important to not like have a reaction when someone shares something with you. You know, yes. It's really important to just kind of like, okay, you know, learn the power of okay, nodding your head, you know, and listening and loving, because there's a lot of things that will come up that might sound scary to you. That your response is not to be scared, not to react, but to listen and to love. And then also it's really helpful to know some really important resource lines like the suicide hotline, and then some other, you know, maybe know a couple good counselors you can refer people to. I think that the church as a whole can be a place where mental health issues are brought to some healing and some peace. And fortunately, oftentimes we say, "Oh no, all you need is Jesus," and we leave that to the side. And so I think we can have a really healthy harmony of the two.
I think it's really good. I think, just going forward and thinking about how this issue matters to God. I love how you made that connection. When you think of this, when you think of the word heart, right? That is the bed, the seed of our emotions. That's really that description. So mental health is really integrated to the heart. So if you're reading through scripture and you have this term brokenhearted, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense that would be connected to mental health. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that. And, you know, I think too, what comes to mind is just treating mental health like it's a real thing. So, for example, let's say in this pandemic time, if you knew someone who's like, wow, I've a really high fever and I can hardly breathe, and like it feels like my lungs are really, really hard. Like I can hardly even talk right now. You'd be like, first off, let's keep
Stay
our
away from me.
distance and social distancing, and you need to go to the hospital because it's a real, it's tangible, which means like you can touch it, right? It's something that you can see and you can have a thermostat for, and those kinds of things. There's some symptoms that are very diagnosable. Well, it's also true with mental health that it ought to be treated like it's real. And I think we treat it like it's real and not like it's like, I've seen it treated as maybe taboo or sinful or something like that, which just makes it worse.
Yeah.
He also commented on the youth ministry thing, especially when it comes to the rate of death, where suicides are really the biggest cause of death for older teen to young adult. I think it's probably after accidents. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know the top two. But
Okay,
it's the third leading cause.
I think accidents are the top ones, so car accidents or just whatever that happens. But what I've noticed working in youth ministry, and I remember a time specifically working with troubled youth in a local public high school, is that suicides are kind of contagious. So, and I say that meaning that if someone has committed suicide in a local context, like a high school, for example, that triggers, if that's the right word to use, but that kind of sets off that type of thinking in other students dealing with depression. So if that happens, even if there's a suicide attempt, that is a time, like there's something contagious like COVID, right, that needs to be dealt with. And I think just having that awareness as well, that mental health issues they're not literally contagious, but they kind of are contagious in a way. And I think just as we respond to people around us, especially those in ministry, to be really aware of how that's affecting people around us, which is why I want to bring up the pandemic issue, is that there's something perhaps contagious happening right now with mental health. That's very non-clinical, by the way, but just want to make that clarification.
Yeah. There's a quote that I'd like to share, if it's okay. It's from Amy Simpson. She has this book called Troubled Minds, and it's specifically written to Christians, to the church. She says, I believe that Christ is calling his church to a great outpouring of love, overflowing from the bottomless well of living water that he's placed within each of his people. And I believe he wants that love to reach people with mental illness and lift them in a great wave of healing and hope, right where they are, among those our society considers untouchable, avoidable, and condemned to the fringes. And that quote just is so inspiring to me. I think that's exactly right, that the church is not a place where people come because they're put together, but church is the place where we come because we're broken and we need healing, and church is a place where we can help heal each other because of the Spirit given to us. 2 Corinthians says that we have the great comforter, right? The Holy Spirit. God is a great comforter who comforts us so that we can then comfort other people. And I think that is critical in our understanding of how to handle mental health crises, people with mental illness, and even our own response to this. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I just love that response. Love that mindset, putting into that framework and handling it just by, once again, just by relying on who God is and realizing that he cares for us. We see that at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, right? That he deeply cares for us and he loves us. And just to remember that and just to respond with a real dependence, which is faith in who God is. So as the church, I think that should be our response, to respond in love, not in judgment, to be patient and to listen and to see it as something that's real. So, well, Drew, any closing thoughts for us before?
Yeah, sure.
We wrap up? Yeah.
Sure. So I think a couple of tips. If you as a person who's part of this listening, if you are depressed or anxious, you have thoughts about dying, or you have thoughts that scare you, or your mind just doesn't feel whole, like I want you to know Jesus has compassion for you. God has not left you. Psalm 139 says there's nowhere we can go to escape God's spirit. Romans 8 says nothing can separate us from God's love. So it's really important that you know that. I also want to give you a couple of tips. So like I said earlier, practicing lament, going through the Psalms and crying out from the depths of what you're feeling is good for the soul. I would also encourage you to find people you can talk to that you trust, and just talk to them about this. And I would say part of that would be seeing a professional as well, and they can help you in a lot of ways. I'd also say a couple physical things you can try, especially in this time when a lot of us are kind of not moving a lot, or we're at home a lot, or isolated. Try to find times to talk with people. Get outside of the house. Make sure you're eating enough. I know it sounds silly, but make sure you're actually eating food that's good for you. Sleeping enough. Make sure you're actually getting the sleep you need. And if you're having trouble sleeping, maybe see a doctor about that. They said that during the last year, there's been more like sleep problems than usual, and I believe that as well. I would also say try limiting or cutting out or being careful with substances that alter your mood. So it could be anything like marijuana, hard drugs for sure, nicotine, even things like caffeine. Those kind of things, alcohol, those things can change our mood and can alter the way we feel. So be careful about that. Find a way to exercise. Do a good productive hobby. There was a while my anxiety was really high, so I got into wood carving, and I was terrible at it. I was terrible. I mean, the worst spoons ever. But it was something to do with my hands that could get my mind off of what was happening in my mind onto what I could do with my hands. And then for those of us who maybe want to be helpers, like Mr. Rogers, be a helper. Number one, show up. Just show up and listen. Follow Jesus' words, being the first fruits of God's new creation. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger, like James writes. Sometimes I just need to sit and repeat that a bunch of times in my head. James 1:19, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. I'd say another thing, fight the stigma. I think John already hit on this a little bit, but be really careful with your language. I'm really OCD about this. Actually, maybe be careful about that. Or this, it's kind of a schizophrenic day today. You're like, people actually, that's a real thing. Certainly never use mental illnesses as names to call someone. Of course not. But sometimes even little things I don't know. We make shows about Monk is about a guy who that TV show is about a guy who has OCD, but we wouldn't make a funny TV show about someone with chronic back pain, So we got to be careful about these things, right? And I think that in a lot of ways, the church kind of has bought into these stigmas and blaming mental illnesses on a lack of faith sometimes, and that's not true. That's not true. So we as a church can commit, I think, to saying, I'm going to help fight the stigma. I'm going to listen. And then I'm going to try to help however I can by referring people, by intervening when need be, even if that's just sitting with someone and listening to them, or trying to kind of clarify the frame, even asking what's going on here? What are you feeling? Those kind of things can be really helpful. But I mean, I guess the bottom line is take care of yourself, you guys. We're in a pandemic, and it's not just COVID. I mean, it's mental health as well. And so take care of yourself, take the time to sit with Jesus and listen to him and pray and read the word and drink enough water. And, my goodness, you guys, take care of yourself. That's my closing words. Take care of yourself.
Awesome. Yeah. One thing that kind of made me think of, just real quick here, is that we talked about this, I think, on an earlier episode as well, but that the gospel and mental health are kind of two separate circles of a Venn diagram. There's overlap for sure, but they aren't the same thing. So you having bad mental health is not a sign they have bad faith. And the ways to solve mental health isn't just pray about it, right? There's also things like getting enough water, sleep, go talk to a doctor. God can work through those things too. He doesn't just work through his word. He works through the people made in his image and the things he's given us on this planet to enjoy. So thank you so much, Drew, for being willing to talk about it, bringing up so many just amazing perspectives, points of views, giving so much awesome advice as how we can navigate this world full of anxiety and these crazy times we find ourselves in. It's appreciated.
Yeah, happy to be part of this. Yeah, I'm grateful for you guys.
Thanks, Drew. Appreciate it. That you lived up to the Acclaimed in their youth pastor.
Maybe even like superseded it a little bit.
I don't think so.
Which is crazy because we set the expectations real high. So.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for having me be part of this. Yeah, I appreciate you guys both a ton.
Yeah, thanks, Drew.
I
We'll
love
talk to you
doing
later.
this podcast. Yeah, I'll talk to you guys later on.
Awesome.
All right, that was awesome. So glad to have Drew on with us. And yeah, I think that last bit where he was talking about tips, that was very practical. That was a good soundbite for you just to listen to and re-listen to, as far as things you can apply to your life. That was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about how the world is crazy. We talked a lot this episode about how we're living in very tumultuous, insane times. And so, as per usual, I think we're going to end off talking about just some things right now that are particularly hitting us. Some weeks these are NFL conversations, some weeks they're deeply painful political conversations, and
yes.
Everything in between. But John, I'm curious, what for you today? What's something that stands out to you?
Sometimes they're deeply painful NFL conversations too. So
true.
Yeah.
As a Broncos fan, I'm sure you are aware of those. You got a lot of those conversations, John. Anyways,
it's hard. It's a hard life since Manning left us. So for me, and I mentioned this last time, I'm pretty sure in the last podcast, episode 22, but still going on is the conflict between Israel and Palestine, and just especially how many Palestinians have lost their lives in this ongoing battle. And this, maybe battle's not the right word. There's just been attacks from either side because of different land issues and just different conflicts that make the Middle East very complicated. Additionally, with Israel, you have a kind of a quickly forced leadership change that has either happened or is happening, that Benjamin Netanyahu is being replaced. They're just very dissatisfied with his leadership. So maybe he wasn't the best leader. I can't speak to that knowledgeably, but changing leaders does bring more instability. So be praying for Israel, be praying for Palestine, be praying for the Middle East right now. What about you, Jonah?
Yeah. So this one is one that hits particularly close to me. So in Canada, there was these things that happened called residential schools. Basically, Native American kids would be taken from their homes and put in these schools that were designed to, and I quote from original documentation, to kill the Indian within the white man, or to kill the Indian and the child, I believe. So they wanted these kids to go and to learn, a culture that they thought would be maybe more helpful to them, living in kind of a Europeanized country. And within these schools, there was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of pain and hardship, a lot of cultural loss, tons of languages are lost. And recently, as of just a little over a week ago, I believe, they were searching the basement of a residential school in a city called Kamloops, and they found the remains of 215 kids that were just stored away in the basement, kids that are faceless, nameless at this point in history. And it hit hard. I have a lot of friends from Canada that are First Nations. And so, seeing and hearing about the treatment that they endured, and having that big reminder of what happened in Canada recently really hurts. For context too, the last residential school closed, I believe, in 1996 in my lifetime. This is not something that happened in the 40s. This is not something that happened in the 20s. Not that would have made it any better, but this is something that's happened very recently. I know a bunch of residential school survivors. I know people who lived through this. And yeah, finding the remains of 215 kids is jarring, scary, and I think rightfully is leading to some conversations in Canada. Just about the treatment of First Nations people. So for me, that's really on my heart. I have the privilege, again, of knowing tons of people who are First Nations, people I really love, who were deeply hurt and affected by this. So it sucks.
I appreciate your care and passion and compassion for this issue. So thanks for bringing that up. That is really tragic. It's really tragic that nobody knew about this until now because of someone, a Canadian of European descent, went missing. There would be the whole, whatever their National Guard equivalent is, out searching for them. And you assumed that they would eventually be found. But he said 250 people.
215.
215.
Keeping in mind that this is one school.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So yeah,
that
it's insane.
Yeah, incredible in a very bad way. Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of real issues. There's a lot of things that we could be struggling with that could cause this kind of mental illness as well. There's a lot of sadness in this world, but there is hope in an everlasting God. So it doesn't diminish anything that Jonah and I have shared, the real tragedy that needs authentic love as a response. I'm grateful for the hope we have despite this broken world. And for those of you struggling, maybe with your own personal tragedy, maybe with mental illness, be sure to respond, especially that last section that Drew was talking about. That was good stuff and very positive for us as we think about this topic of mental illness. Jonah, thank you so much for having me and the acclaimed Drew Fajen as well
We got him on
this podcast. And for everyone listening, thanks for joining us in on episode 23. Just want to remind you, Student Connection is in just a few months. I believe it is 5 months from today that we have Student Connection. So it is right around the corner, in person, live. So excited.
It's awesome. Can't wait.
Yep. Well, have a good week, everyone, and we will see you in 2 weeks. And we'll break there.
Mm-hmm. So if you're watching this, right, you're watching it on YouTube, I want to explain this to you because I thought about it a couple of times. I held my hand up. This is just a Batman picture. John said it looks like a bruise. I don't know. I'm not going around like punching people to the point where my fist is getting bruised or anything like that. Just to clarify, because you watching now are people watching the YouTube video, and you might have seen this. I felt the need to share that. But yeah.
Yeah, he had a really bad accident with the dunk tank where the kid threw that ball really hard and just missed and hit Jonah.
Yeah, it's true.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually got stuck under the dunk tank. I had to get my way out. So it's pretty intense.
That's rad.
Wow. Yeah. Anyways.
I am not seeing any questions from viewers, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up.
Cool.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you in a couple weeks.